Greetings, one and all, and welcome to another episode of Time Traveler. I hope you're excited. This one's going to be a good one, and I hope I can fit it all in. Today's amazing guest is the incomparable Josephine Baker. I'm giving you a moment to applaud. Yes, she is a pioneer, the first Black woman to really break the mold and go out into the world and do everything. And I'm really proud to be able to present her today. She was born Frida Josephine McDonald in St. Louis, Missouri on June 3rd, 1906. Her mother, Carrie, was adopted by Richard and Elvira McDonald in Little Rock, Arkansas. They were former slaves and of African and Native American descent. There's a dispute over her paternity, but her estate identifies vaudevillian drummer Eddie Carson as her father. The mystery paternity was never solved, and Carrie died having never clarified the truth. Josephine and her family, and biographers, believe that he was a white man, but it could never be confirmed. Josephine grew up in a mixed, low-income neighborhood near Union Station. She was always dressed inappropriately due to the family's extreme poverty and did not have the luxury of running water in her home. She was often hungry while playing in the railroad yards, but grew in her street smarts. Josephine's mother married a man who was constantly out of work and was forced to take in laundry to make enough money for basic needs. It became so difficult that Josephine began working as a live-in domestic at the tender age of 8 years old. She worked for white families that had plenty of status and money, and while they gave her a room to sleep in, some also abused her when she inevitably made errors because she was just a child. She dropped out of school at age 12, and at age 13, she was living in cardboard boxes in the streets, making forts out of the cardboard, finding her food in garbage cans, and dancing on street corners for coins. She also married at age 13. Her union with Willie Wells lasted less than a year. She returned to street performance in a group known as the Jones Family Band. Josephine's mother did not approve of her life as an entertainer and wanted her to commit to her husband Willie Baker, whom she married at age 15 in 1921. She divorced him in 1925, at least she separated from him, and went to New York City, where she had been booked in a revue, which launched her career into significant success. She kept the Baker name for the rest of her career and traveled often, bringing gifts and money to her mother and younger half-sister, but she could never mend the relationship with her mother, and so she decided to take her career to Paris, France. Josephine had made her way into the vaudeville scene in St. Louis, danced at the Plantation Club in New York City during the Harlem Renaissance, and made her way into many a chorus line in Broadway revues. She was soon the highest paid chorus girl in vaudeville. Beginning as a comic performer in local clubs, she was seen and given her opportunity to perform in Paris, which she ended up calling her home for the rest of her life. Josephine would later say that her career and fame never started until she was in Paris, dancing erotically in the Folies Bergère in 1926. She performed her Danse Sauvage, wearing the equivalent of a G-string adorned with artificial bananas. She was rising to fame during the New Art Deco era, which brought about a fascination with non-Western art. She capitalized on the exotic style she was beginning to add to her act, including a cheetah named Chiquita, who wore a diamond collar and often escaped her harness during the show, only to terrorize the musicians in the orchestra pit. The show was never the same twice and was always exciting. Baker's success was world-renowned. Ernest Hemingway referred to her as the most sensational woman anyone ever saw. Hemingway would spend hours talking to Josephine in Parisian bars, and Pablo Picasso used her as his muse in a series of paintings. French poet, artist, and playwright Jean Cocteau became a friend and worked diligently to catapult her to international stardom. Baker toured Europe and was invited to some very prestigious clubs to perform. It was during this period that she met a Sicilian man who passed himself off as a count in title. His name was Giuseppe Pepito Abatino. He found his way to becoming her manager and into her bedroom. Although they had a steamy relationship, they could not marry because Josephine was still legally married to Willie. During this period of her life, Josephine also transformed her career under Abatino's guidance. She starred in 3 films and scored a successful song called J'ai 2 amours, I Have 2 Loves, in 1931. She received months of vocal coaching and received the lead in a revival of Offenbach's opera La Créole. The production ran for 6 months, and Josephine Baker was now a diva of the stage, no longer the petite sauvage she had been at the start of her career. She was a strong woman and had become the first Black woman to rise to international fame and wealth. Her fame in France and all of Europe did not quite translate to America. Baker appeared in Broadway's Ziegfeld Follies in 1936, replacing the infamous Gypsy Rose Lee. But the box office numbers were less than impressive, and the critics berated her voice as too thin, said her dancing could easily be topped anywhere, so she left New York heartbroken. Josephine gave up her American citizenship and returned to Paris. In 1937, she married Jean Lyon and became a French citizen. Many speak of various relationships she had during this lifetime, between marriages and not sure if during, with both men and women. Well, yeah, we are sure if during. Sorry, Josephine. France declared war on Germany in September of 1939 after the invasion of Poland. Josephine was recruited by French military intelligence to collect information about German troop locations from government officials she met at parties and events. This is a strangely common thing based on what we know of Coco Chanel's experience during the war. Very interesting side note. Notes were kept in invisible ink in Josephine's sheet music so that she could share information with allies when she traveled. She was discreet and never caught or raised any suspicion. As a celebrity, she could escape a lot of scrutiny, including the strip searches others may have been subjected to, as she also hid notes about foreign information in her underwear. After the war, she was honored with the Croix de Guerre, as well as the Rosette de la Résistance. She was also given the title of Chevalier by General Charles de Gaulle. In 1949, Baker had emerged as a reinvented artist and returned to the Folies Bergère as a serious performer who could use her political status to take on heavier material with success. She was invited back to the United States to perform and then took on a national tour. She was enjoying rave reviews, and her audiences were huge, including a 100,000-person parade that came to celebrate her NAACP title of Woman of the Year. Many accolades were to follow. In 1951, Baker appeared at the Stork Club and criticized the owner for discouraging Black patrons, as well as a columnist who did not echo her sentiment. He retaliated by slandering her in the press as a communist sympathizer, which was a very serious offense at the time. The public was outraged and forced her to cancel her engagements and return to France. It would be nearly a decade before she returned to the U.S. Fidel Castro invited Baker to perform in Havana, Cuba, in 1966 to celebrate the 7th anniversary of his revolution. She broke attendance records at the Teatro Musical de la Habana in 1968 and was back in Europe performing in Yugoslavia and other countries. But before long, she was in financial trouble, saying that the world had forgotten her. She returned to the stage in 1973 at Carnegie Hall and received a standing ovation. The following year, she appeared in a royal variety performance at the London Palladium, where she celebrated 50 years in French show business. She began to forget song lyrics and ramble between songs due to advancing age, but the audiences still loved her. Just want to make a quick side note while we're watching the build. This bathroom was as close a replica as I could find. I hope you think I did a good job based on, again, what we have in The Sims 4. As with her entire apartment, she had a lot of wonderful properties and she stayed in a lot of beautiful places, and I drew quite a bit of inspiration from that. Continuing on, during her late career in the 1950s and 1960s, Josephine began a heavy involvement in the civil rights movement. After being refused at 36 New York hotels due to racial discrimination, she began to speak out about racial inequality and refused to perform for segregated audiences. She traveled and gave talks at various colleges about the injustice that Black Americans were facing. She was a crusader who gathered a lot of support, opening the eyes of other patrons who had not realized the abuse and disgrace that she and others had suffered. She made a difference among the club scene, forcing them to open to all patrons. Josephine became a national hero after rallying support to save Willie McGee in Mississippi, a Black man accused of rape, and succeeded in having his life spared. She was bolstered by the lack of racism in Europe and became a fireball for civil justice. In some circles, she was considered racy and too outspoken, shunned by some for her brazen battle against discrimination, by other people of color, in fact. She spoke at the March on Washington, standing by the side of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and said that she had walked into the palaces of kings and queens and into the houses of presidents. But I cannot walk into a hotel in America and get a cup of coffee. After King was assassinated, his widow approached her to be the face of the civil rights movement, but she declined, saying that she could not leave her children. Which brings us to our final glorious fact about Josephine. Perhaps one of Josephine's most notable attributes in life was her gigantic heart. During her fourth and final marriage and amidst the civil rights movement and her performance career, Josephine began adopting children of all races, creeds, and colors. She formed a family that she called her Rainbow Tribe. She often traveled with her children, and she gave them a beautiful life at her enormous French estate, Château des Milandes. Upon her estate were hotels, a farm, many opportunities for her children to sing and dance, for all to see how joyfully and peacefully they lived together in their castle. She lived with husband Joe Bouillon and her 2 daughters and 10 sons from all over the world: Finland, Korea, Israel, Venezuela, France, Algeria, Japan, and Colombia. There was yet another tribute to Josephine's 50 years of performance in Paris, 4 days after her final performance. She was found in her bed, peacefully floating amid newspapers with glowing reviews of her performance. She had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage and slipped into a coma. She was taken to Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital, where she died on April 12, 1975, at age 68. She was Catholic at the end of her life and had a beautiful funeral at l'Église de la Madeleine, the only American-born woman to ever receive full French military honors at her funeral. There was a huge procession leading to her interment at Cimetière du Monaco. Many events, days of honor, and even quarters of Paris have been named for Josephine Baker. Not just an entertainer, but a beacon of light in a weary world, striving for joy and peace for all. Truly a spectacular, amazing human being. No skin color, no gender. You can't put any kind of labels on her. She was a force of nature, and I'm just even honored to talk about her. Her legacy is immense, and she deserves every accolade that she received. There is so much information, as always, but in particular, she touched so many lives in so many arenas, and it wasn't just in the entertainment world. She did reach a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and you'll see varying types of information, recreations of her life, clips of her career, so many beautiful things that are just out there on the internet about her for free. I have included a slew, at least more than usual, links in the description for you. There are some clips of her performing in some of her famous performances, like Zouzou in 1934. She was dancing the original Charleston in 1925. There's a clip of that. There are links to her biography, as well as a YouTube channel called JosephineBakerTube. Amazing, right? And also the Josephine Baker story, which was a recreation of her life as a feature film in 1991. And it is spectacular. I think they did a good job depicting some of the discrimination and some of the hardships that she had to go through to reach that pinnacle as the person that she was in society. I can't just call her a performer. There's not one label that fits. So I'm sorry. I just think she's amazing. So I hope you're enjoying what I'm doing with her place here and how I made her look. I think I tried to capture her glamour in Sims 4 style because she was dazzling. She didn't, surprisingly, I mean, maybe not surprisingly, a lot of females have issues with this. Not to say that males don't, but probably all humans do. But she had issues thinking that she wasn't really that pretty, that she wasn't at all glamorous, that she was just this lanky little girl. But that's not how she came across on screen. She definitely was a beautiful ingenue, and wow. When you see some of these clips, you'll see exactly what I mean. Her comedic style was a little bit over the top, but her singing was lovely. Her performance was just so natural. And I hope you do get to enjoy those clips. And I hope you enjoyed what I did with her place. I am in love with the bathroom. She did have a bathroom that looked remarkably similar to that. I try to capture that as much as possible. And I hope you enjoy the pictures I've inserted for this video and my very, very long documentation of her life, which I once again omitted so much from. There were so many good details I wanted to include to really, really round out the picture of who she was. But if you look into her, I'm sure you'll see some of that. I appreciate your being here. Thank you, as always, for following this series. There is more to come, and I hope you'll also check out my Hideouts series with gangster homes and lives and families and all the details behind the scenes of the mob. Also in the 1920s and 30s and 40s. My favorite time period right now. Well, most of my life. Yeah, my favorite. And yeah, you can't really do Sims in my other favorite time, my number one favorite time period, which is, you know, France in the 17th and 18th century. But maybe one day, maybe. For now, I'm going to sign off and leave you with the last little chunk of this apartment and the walkthrough. I hope all of you are happy, safe, and so incredibly healthy right now, and that you have a beautiful day.